In 3, 2, and 1.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Diana Famia. I am the president of Greater Washington, D.C. region of the National Organization of Italian American Women. I'd like to welcome you to our presentation this evening on behalf of the Washington, D.C. region and the Rhode Island region. Tonight, we're celebrating Women's History Month by discussing and talking about a woman who really came to the United States and didn't know the language and became a real impact to Italian immigrants in New York. This evening, I'd also want to tell you that Julia Bellotti will be your moderator, and she will be accepting any questions later on. And you will be hearing from her. Julia is a longtime member of NOIAW. She started as a member when she was at American University. She was a recipient of the National Cultural Exchange program. And today she's a contractor in Washington, D.C., working with organizations. And now I would like to turn this over to Julia.
Thank you, Diana. So good evening, all. As Diana mentioned, we will have time for Q&A, so I just want to do a couple housekeeping items before we dive into our presentation. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat box as well as the Q&A, and you can ask questions in either of those locations. I'll be monitoring them both throughout. The way our presentation is going to work today, we are going to pause for a Q&A about halfway through and then conclude with additional questions at the end. So we'll give you an opportunity to get some questions in early, but that won't be your only question time. Feel free to wait towards the end if you want to do that instead. So with that, it is my honor to introduce our speaker for this evening, Sister Pietrina Racuglia, MSc. She's president and chair of the board of the New York City-based Cabrini Mission Foundation. The Cabrini Mission Foundation supports programs that provide healthcare and education to women, children, immigrants, and the elderly. She's been a missionary sister of the Sacred Heart of Jesus for 56 years and has served in ministries of education, immigration, counseling, and leadership in her congregation. As a daughter of Mother Cabrini, she has a passion for helping immigrants. Her present ministry allows her to raise funds for vulnerable people here in the United States, as well as for their missions in Central America who are also in great need, especially during COVID-19. So she has done presentations on Mother Cabrini in Australia, Italy, and throughout the United States. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Sister.
Thank you, Julia. And I want to thank all of you for having me here this evening. We are going to be talking about a woman on the move. If you see this statue, Mother Cabrini is moving. She never stays still. She constantly moves. She is a woman of great passion, of great integrity, and of great generosity. I chose to speak about her tonight based on the fact that she was a patroness of immigrants, and not to go into detail to her early childhood or anything like that. But as there's a slideshow, I believe, that is being presented. Am I correct?
Yes, I can bring that up for you.
Bring that up, please. Okay. All right, so Mother really came here. She's a patroness of immigrants. Mother Cabrini was born in Sant'Angelo Lodigiano in Italy, right in Milano, in that section, which is being hit hard by the COVID-19 at this time. Next slide, please. She was born on July 15th, 1850. And they baptized her real early because they thought she was going to die. She was very fragile, very weak. As I looked at your history, I saw that on July 15th, I believe 1980, a small group of women got together on the west side of New York and started this organization. So you're a partner with Mother Cabrini. She was born on July 15th. Your organization started on July 15th. Mother was very, very fragile as a young child and also as an adult. In fact, she tried to join 2 different communities in Italy. Both refused her because of her health. And so next slide, please. So with the help of her spiritual director and the bishop in Codogno, Italy, she decided that he said, well, why don't you start your own institute? And she was one of the first women to start a missionary institute. Frail, not of good health, but she was Italian, and Italians have a certain amount of chutzpah and courage and audacity. And so she decided that she would open a house in Codogno, Italy. Next slide, please. Her desire was to go really to China. But when she went to Pope Leo XIII, he told her absolutely not. You are not to go to China. You are to go to the United States, because he saw the situation in the United States of the Italian immigrants, and they had no one to help them. And Bishop Scalabrini also pushed the Pope to push Mother Cabrini. So her dream of going to China never materialized, but she came to New York City. The next slide, please. On March 31st, 1889, she and 7 other sisters arrived. Some of them were so seasick. She didn't get seasick, but they were. And they began their life in the United States. But you have to realize, when she came here, she went to the bishop, as she was told to go. And he said, no, you're to go back. You're not to stay here in the United States. We don't want you here at this time. So she said, I'm not going back because the Pope sent me. And Mother Cabrini had connections. So she must have telegrammed, we believe, someone at the Vatican. The Vatican called the bishop, and Mother Cabrini got to stay here. Now, the first night that the sisters were here, they were in a tenement building that was full of rats, etc. So they lived the same kind of life that the Italian immigrants were living at that time. Mother was very keen on helping these people, not to assimilate, but to integrate into this new country. But she too had to do that. Mother spoke Italian. She used to say to the sisters all the time, I will speak good English once I get to heaven. So she never really spoke excellent English, but she was smart in that she surrounded herself with sisters who spoke English. And at that time, at that time, there was a lot of prejudice against the Italians. And so therefore, whenever Mother bought property, she would sign her name, but she would have the Irish sisters sign underneath her so that she could get the property and get it moving for the mission. Next slide, please. She writes about the Italian immigrants in the ghettos of the Lower East Side, where they had to live in small spaces, where people were just crowded together, sometimes 8 people in a room. They were workers who were exploited. They were not treated properly. They were called all kinds of names, as we know. And she had been trying, Vatican connections, okay. There's a question that came up that I got distracted by. So she really wanted to not only help them materially, but to help them spiritually. Next slide, please. The sisters wrote in their diaries that they listened to the stories of the immigrants and the men and women spoke of their unhappiness. Remember the beauty of Italy. Remember the greenery, the fresh vegetables, all that. They had none of that here. Nothing here was familiar to them. They were treated like slaves, working for cheap wages, and their young daughters and sons worked in factories in deplorable conditions. They missed their families. They missed their home countries. Mother, next slide, please. There are many similarities today as there were in Mother Cabrini's time. In the Lower East Side, there are overcrowding conditions, in many cities too. There's difficulty in immigrants getting into the United States, and they're exploited by many, sometimes they're even by their own, some who call themselves their protectors. There are a lack of people who are open to them, to accept these immigrants and foreigners, just as it was for our families. I remember my father telling me this story, which was very interesting to me. He had to go to work at the age of, I think it was 14, and he was walking down the street, and a group of boys his age made a line in front of him and said to him, "Go back," and called him a dago. "Go back, you're not to cross this line." And he figured if he didn't cross that line, he wouldn't get to work. And so he said, what I decided with my brother who was with me, we were going to fight off these boys and go to work, because if we went home, we'd get worse from Pop. So in other words, we too had to fight in order to get integrated into this country. Next slide, please. As I said before, our sisters experienced the same hardships that the immigrants experienced. They embraced new and difficult ministries in a culture and language setting with which they were unfamiliar. If you've been down to Transfiguration Church, that's where we started on Mott Street, Mulberry Street, around that area. There was poverty, particularly as the ministries began, and there was much prejudice that had to be overcome. Mother needed to raise money for the ministries, and it was very difficult at that time to get the funds, but she always managed somehow. And that is how the different ministries grew throughout the United States. Next slide, please. It didn't take Mother long to become well acquainted with the ethnic slurs and prejudices of the day, some of which were used on some of the sisters as well. She once wrote, "Some of the people cannot bear the sight of us Italians." Now, Mother Cabrini in the New York News, remember we used to have that newspaper, I don't know if it's still around, but in the New York News, it was written that these women dressed in black are going into these most dangerous situations in the Lower East Side, into different apartments, working among the Italian people, trying to, help their families, etc. And the police are even afraid to go into these neighborhoods. And that is true. That's what happened. Also, Mother Cabrini, around this time, she read in the newspaper. She always read the newspaper from front to back. Of course, it was the Italian newspaper because she couldn't read English. And when she read it, she saw that they were lynching the Italian immigrants in New Orleans. So she went to New Orleans with a group of sisters and stood right in front of the place where they were lynching these people. They were lynching the Black people and they were lynching the Italian people. And she fought and fought and fought for them not to be lynched. So she had courage. She had courage in her day that other people just didn't have. I think we were going to stop because I see some questions coming up.
Yep, we do have a couple of questions, so if you wouldn't mind, we'll take a hot moment to answer some of these. So we have a couple questions from Marjorie. So first, did Mother Cabrini speak any English, and how was she able to speak to different organizations?
Mother did speak some English. Okay, she did. She actually became an American citizen in Seattle. When she became an American citizen, the Italian sisters were very upset. But she figured that was the only way she was going to get business done. But Mother never did her business alone. She always did it with a sister who could speak that language.
That makes a lot of sense. So that's good to know. We have another question here from Mary Lou. You mentioned Mother Cabrini's Vatican connections, including access to Pope Leo XIII. Could you comment on how she was able to establish these important connections?
To Bishop Scalabrini.
Or to the Pope, since she was sent by the Pope.
Yes, through Scalabrini, who went to the Pope, Bishop Scalabrini, and got him to convince Mother Cabrini to come to the United States. But he didn't, in her diary, it's interesting, he didn't have to do too much convincing, because even though she wanted to go to China, she felt a calling to help the Italian immigrants.
Very cool.
But it was through the bishops in Milano that got her connected to the Pope.
That's great. So we've got another comment or question here from Fran. She writes, my late father's Aunt Rose Di Lorenzo, was one of the 7 sisters who came to the US with Mother Cabrini. As a child, I was always told that my father's Aunt Rose had been Mother Cabrini's companion. I'm probably showing my age, but when I was younger, nuns always walked in pairs. I presume that's what my father meant by his aunt being Mother Cabrini's companion. Aunt Rose had a sad ending to her vocation as a nun, but that's a story for another time. So she asks, is there a way for her to research information about Rose, perhaps Rosa de Lorenzo? She says, thank you, and that she's named for Mother Cabrini. Her own mother always had a great devotion to her, and throughout her lifetime, they'd always drive from their home in Brooklyn to the church at Fort Tryon Park, where Mother's body is buried inside of a wax body underneath the altar. So
now, did she say what was her?
Rose de Lorenzo.
Di Lorenzo, wasn't that Severino? Di Lorenzo.
Yeah,
okay,
Lorenzo.
In order for her to research that, she would have to write to, if you could, to Sister Catherine Gary.
Is that G-A-R-Y?
G-A-R-R-Y, who does our archives. Or does she live in Brooklyn? Where does she live?
I'm not sure. I know she grew up, it seems, in Brooklyn. I'll wait for her to reply. Yeah, she's in Manhattan.
Okay, where in Manhattan?
Near Union Square.
That's where we are. We're at 222 East 19th Street.
Great.
And that's where Sister Catherine is if she wants to drop her a line. Mother always traveled, we always traveled in twos. We never traveled alone. It was part of the rule. We had to have someone, a companion all the time. So she was one of the 7 sisters that came over?
Yeah, her late father's aunt. So, and this attendee writes that she lives at 210 East 15th. So, meant to be.
She's
so
by.
I'm glad we're able to hopefully make some connections and do further research.
Well,
I wanted to add a couple more because we're getting several more questions in. So we have a comment from Lynn. At the times that she was at Transfiguration, the Italians were not able to celebrate Mass in the church. You know, they were regulated to the basement without windows. So I don't know if you want to comment on how service was during that time.
Yes, they were. We were everywhere. Everywhere the Italians were not allowed. There was an Irish church There was an Italian church, even in Philadelphia, in New York, all over. The Italians are really, really had it hard. They had it very hard. I remember saying to my grandmother, why did you come here when your country is so beautiful? And she said to me, you can't eat beauty, you know? So they really were discriminated against greatly.
And so we've got another question here from Anton. Can you further elaborate assimilating versus integrating?
Yes. Integrating into the culture is not only understanding the culture, but bringing your culture with you. You never give up your own culture. Okay? You always remain Italian, American. But you integrate into the society. You don't just assimilate it's like oil and water. When you put oil in it, it mixes if you mix it, but it doesn't become assimilated. I don't know how else to say it. I say that you get integrated into the society gives to you and you give to the society when you're integrated into the society. Pope Francis says it all the time. Help the immigrants to become integrated. Don't give up your identity. Never give up your identity for anyone. You know, always remain who you are, where you come from, and bring that to the society, and the society gives to you and you give to it. I don't know if that answers it.
I think so. So we have one comment from Patrice. She says, I went to Mother Cabrini School for 1st and 2nd grade and remember praying at the altar before Mother Cabrini. Thank you for bringing her closer. So just a great comment for her. We've got another question.
She went to the villa. Did she go to the elementary school up at Fort Tryon?
I'll wait for Patrice to answer here. Yes, she did.
Ah, okay. A lot of our sisters went there too. Okay.
Nice. So we've got another question here. Mother Cabrini is often described as a shrewd businesswoman and persistent fundraiser. Can you share some examples of that?
Okay. When she died in the New York News, in newspapers in New York City, it said if Mother Cabrini was a man, she would have been known as a great businessman. In Chicago, we were building a hospital on Lakeshore Drive, and she thought she was being cheated by the construction people. So in the middle of the night, she took the sisters with her, a few of them, and they measured the property that they bought and where the hospital was supposed to be built. And they found that they were shortening it, the contractors. So the next day she went to them and she said, no, this isn't true. I want the building built like this. And whenever she built things, excuse me, even if she built it in California, and she had some supplies in Colorado, she would have the supplies shipped over to California from some of our places if they had it left over. Mother knew how to work with business people. She was, you know, when she saw that she was being cheated and she just got the sisters to measure the building, it was like, okay. Then they treated her differently. She was a good businesswoman. All of her properties, if you look at them, if you go online, they're all on beautiful areas. The one in Dobbs Ferry is right on the Hudson. The one in Seattle is on right on the river. The one at Washington Heights is right on the Hudson. The one in West Park is on the Hudson River. So every single place that she got prime real estate. And she really knew how to work it.
That's awesome. So I think we'll do one more question and then let you continue on with the rest of the presentation here. And additional questions, I'll definitely get to them when we do our second Q&A, but I do just want to be mindful of our time here. So our kind of final question before we continue on, can you provide any links or names of sources that attendees can use to, show some of this information and all that you've shared with us thus far?
Yes, Mother, I'm coming here. I'm going to get something. The best book historical book is by Sister Mary Louise Sullivan. It's called Mother Cabrini, Italian Immigrant of the Century. It is one of the best books out there for the historical piece. The link for more information one would be www.cabriniworld.org. And the other one is www.mothercabrini.org.
Great. I've put both of those in the chat box here, so all attendees should be able to see both of those links. Sister, I will turn it back to you so we can continue on with this presentation. And then again, don't worry, everyone, we will do a second Q&A at the end of this presentation.
Next slide, please. Mother Cabrini saw that the Italian immigrants were settling all over the country. So she traveled from east to west, New York, New Jersey, Chicago, Pennsylvania, New Orleans, Seattle, California, and Denver. Anyone that lives in New York City who will go up, if you want to go up to the shrine at 701 Fort Washington Avenue, you will see a carriage that she actually used when traveling from the city to West Park, New York, back and forth. The others, she took trains. Next slide, please. In California in 1905, though there were certainly Italian immigrants, the Mexicans surpassed them in number and poverty. So Mother not only served the Italian immigrants, but she also served the Mexican immigrants. I failed to tell you this story about an Italian immigrant that was in the hospital in New York City, and our sisters used to go visit in the hospitals. And this man said to the sister, I have a letter here from home, but I haven't been able to read it for months because I can't read Italian. She couldn't read, and there was no one that could read it to him. So our sisters read it to him, and he found out that his mother had died. And so he wasn't consolable, they said. So everywhere that she saw a need, she just got up and went and sent the sisters. And we kept on getting more and more sisters, not like today, where people aren't really, in the United States anywhere, joining with us. There are others throughout in Africa and others in Central America, but not in the United States. Next slide, please. She also went to Brazil. You know, there's a big Brazilian, Italian immigrants in Brazil. Even now, some of our sisters came from Brazil, and their mothers and fathers were Italians that settled in Brazil. So she went to Brazil, Argentina, Spain, London, Italy, Central America, France. In Argentina, I mean, she actually crossed the Andes on a mule. I mean, dear Lord, the woman had courage. You know, and she got her strength from the Sacred Heart of Jesus. You know, she really did believe and trust in divine providence. Next slide, please. Mother Cabrini and the First Sisters realized that not only there were spiritual needs of the immigrants, but they needed to be educated, they needed health care, and they needed social services. So she began schools, she began night schools, clinics, hospitals, orphanages, worked in parishes, visited prisoners. Whatever the immigrants needed, she and her sisters tried to assist them in whatever way possible. Mother Cabrini never wanted to do healthcare, never ever wanted her sisters to do healthcare. One night in a dream, she saw the Blessed Mother, and the Blessed Mother had an apron on and had like a tin tray with hospital instruments on it. And she said to her, "What are you doing?" And the Blessed Mother said to Mother Cabrini, according to what she wrote in her diary, "I'm doing what you don't want to do." So she's decided to put our sisters into healthcare. Next slide, please. John Paul II in the year 2000 wrote to us as Cabrini sisters and said that today you incarnate with creativity and generosity the spirit of Mother Cabrini in the unprecedented and complex shifts of migration. We've opened our houses to immigrant families. We've enrolled a lot of children in our schools throughout the Institute who can't afford the total amount of money for their tuition. We've also visited detention centers where they hold people who are undocumented and held up in these detention centers. We've done pastoral work in the detention centers. So we've really tried to continue Mother's work. And she gives us the courage and the energy to do it at this time when it is so, so difficult. Next slide, please. So Pope Francis tells us to welcome, promote, protect, and integrate our immigrant brothers and sisters. So as missionary sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, that is what we try to do. We basically try to welcome, promote, protect, and like I said, integrate. Next slide, please. 71 years ago, Pope Pius XII declared her the universal patroness of immigrants. So we as her daughters, we continue that work. Next slide, please. What we actually do, we have a public stance against anti-trafficking of women and children, and we have a public stance on immigration, which says that, that in all of our institutions and all of our works, we are to assist the immigrants in whatever way we can. So every immigrant can find in us, her daughters, and in Mother Cabrini, a friend who will provide for them and help them to develop, just like the early Italians did. The early Italians had a very difficult time, but Mother assisted them in whatever way possible. And that is it. If you have questions.
We do have some questions. So we have one from Diane. Could you comment or speak a little bit more about Mother's Seattle years? There's a Cabrini Hospital and still a Cabrini Medical Building downtown.
Are you in Seattle? Is she in Seattle?
That was from Diane. Let me. Yes, she is.
Yes. Well, we did have a hospital. We don't have it anymore. We have apartments there, HUD apartments for the elderly, where the hospital used to stand. And the villa in Seattle is right on the property on the river. We used to have a school there. We don't have it anymore. As we became smaller and smaller in number, we had to withdraw from certain places.
And so what are some of the current outreach programs that the organization services?
we're big on education. Especially when I say education is, we don't have our schools anymore. We have our university in Radnor, Pennsylvania, but we don't have our schools where we used to have them before. And what we're doing is we have one school in New Orleans. We're helping the kids who can't afford their tuition due to COVID-19, their parents losing their jobs. And so we're assisting them there. We're assisting some of the DACA students. Those are the children that came over with their parents when they were young, and now they're studying for college. We're assisting them in trying to help them to pay their tuition. Some of the outreaches, we do a lot of anti-trafficking work. We have closets for clothing for the women who are caught in trafficking, and the FBI will bring them to 2 of our places. We don't name them so that they can get clothing and get a start, etc. We also are in refugee camps, one in Uganda, one in South Sudan. But here in the United States, we have immigration services, and we have education, and we have elderly, the elderly in Dobbs Ferry.
That's really great to hear.
On COVID-19, though, what we have done is there's a lot of food insufficiency in New York, and the undocumented are really suffering because they don't get the benefits. The children are American citizens, but my grandfather was undocumented. I want to tell you a story about my grandmother. She never became an American citizen. Why? She said to me, during World War II, I know I'm going off topic. Stop me if you want. During World War II, you know what happened to the Italians? The Italians who were legal permanent residents during World War II got an alien card that they had to report monthly to immigration. And my grandmother said, I have 3 boys in the Army, in the Marines, in the Navy, and you are calling me an enemy? The card, if you look on immigration, you'll see it's called an alien enemy card that the Italians received.
We have a panelist that attendee that commented that happened to Enzio Pinza, the tenor, as well.
Yes, that was terrible. So I got off the subject, and now I forgot what the subject was. Our outreaches are during COVID-19 are food insufficiency, and we're trying to help people pay their rent because I'm in the fundraising business here. So they thought that they weren't going to get evicted, yes, but they thought they didn't have to pay their rent in the end, but they have to, or they will eventually get evicted. So we're writing grants, and people are giving us donations for COVID-19 relief.
That's great to hear. We have a question here. Do you see similarities or could maybe comment on the similarities and differences between Mother Cabrini and Mother Elizabeth Ann Seton?
Seton helped us. Yes. They were, when Mother Cabrini came here, the Sisters of Charity housed us for a while. That order, and they were the ones who told us to put the veil on in order to be accepted. Yes, I do.
That's great. So we have a thank you here from Nancy. She says there's prejudice still today. This past year, the New York Mayor's Wife's Committee for Statues celebrating women's contributions ignored Mother Cabrini, who had actually received the most votes, and they decided in favor of other ethnic groups. The New York governor and Brooklyn Archbishop, with support of the Italian American community, found the funds and had an amazing statue that depicts Mother Cabrini in a boat with immigrant children dedicated in Battery Park, and that's now standing. Mother served all immigrants, including Native Americans, so thank you for continuing her legacy. So that's from Nancy in Delgado.
Well, we were at the unveiling of the statue, and if you get a chance, it's in Battery Park. It's beautiful. Here's a picture of it, but it's yes. And Philip Folio, one of the men who who worked on this, he passed on to heaven with COVID-19 recently. He was one of the movers and the shakers to get that statue there.
So we've got another question here. Do the sisters work with children separated from their families at the border?
It's good that you're asking that. We just had a phone call with a group that we worked with down there. It's called Tias and Abuelitas. And the children are in the Donna Detention Center. And they're trying to get these children out of that detention center and placed in shelters that are better. Because you're only supposed to remain, if you're a child, 72 hours in these detention centers, and they're staying longer. So what we're trying to figure out, how is it that we can help them get connected with their relatives here in the United States, the unaccompanied minors. They're processing them now. FEMA is there right now to help organize this and get, I'm sure the children have the phone numbers of their parents or some relative. And as it's going to take time to process them, but that has been the cruelest thing that we have ever done to children. It breaks your heart. We've been down there to visit these centers, but they won't let you in.
And so kind of, I think leading into several questions more on immigration, given the wave of anti-immigration sentiment in the US, how do you foresee the future of immigration going here?
Well, being daughters of Mother Cabrini, we still have to have the courage that she had and speak up for the voiceless. We have no choice, right? Congress, move, get into right to the people who have the ability to change the laws. And also, I think a good piece is, look, why do people leave Italy to come here? It's poverty. They wanted a better life for their children. We all got a better life because they left. So if their countries can be built up, and if we can help their countries to be built up and to provide jobs, that would be good too. So we are active as women religious. We're in our 70s and 80s now, and we have a few under 65, that's good. But we're active in writing letters and lobbying and in going to Washington when there's no COVID.
And so kind of spitballing off of that, we've got another question here. Considering all the work that Mother Cabrini accomplished for Italian immigrants, how do you feel or handle the Italians who now refuse other immigrants to be allowed in the US?
You can't change their mind. You just have to help them to remember where they came from. My grandfather jumped ship right off of Ellis Island. Why did he do that? He was a teenager. He had an eye infection. And when they came through Ellis Island, if they had an eye infection, they sent you back. So he swam to the shore. So I just say to people, look, I'm trying to say to you, remember where you came from. The only ones that really, really belong here are the Native Americans. But we were allowed to come, we were allowed to stay, and we contributed a great deal to this country. And these new immigrants will do the same. You've got kids who are DACA kids, who are nurses, doctors, who worked through the pandemic, and you want to deport them? But you're not going to change their mind. You're not. You just have to tell them, remember where you came from. And some don't want to remember.
Fair enough. So we've got a couple kind of historical questions. This is from Anna Maria Larson. We lived in Denver for 41 years and would attend Mass at Mother's property in the mountains. I remember that Mother's body was housed in a glass case in one of those buildings. Where is their uncorrupted body now? And can you tell us a little bit more about the school that she had there?
In Denver?
Yeah, her property, it looks like up in the mountains near Denver.
Oh, the mountain property. Mother used that as a camp for children. She founded that spot because she always wanted to take the kids out of the city and bring them to the country. So that's why she founded West Park. That's why she founded the place in Seattle. That's why she founded the place in Colorado. Her body is really not all together in New York City. It wasn't in Colorado. They had a mannequin of her, but her body, this is gross. But anyway, her head is in Rome at Via Sicilia in one of our houses. Her arm is in Chicago, in the shrine in Chicago, and the rest of her body, her bones are in the altar at 701 Fort Washington Avenue, New York.
Thank you. And then what were the 2 miracles attributed to Mother Cabrini?
Peter Smith, he was a child who was born, and the nurse was supposed to put some drops in his eyes, a certain number. I'm not a nurse, so I don't know the amount. And instead, she put the wrong amount, and his 2 eyes were burnt out. And the sisters saw this, and they wrapped the baby's. Peter Smith has gone to heaven since then. He was a priest. His gauze around his eyes, and they prayed and prayed and prayed all night. And the next day, when the doctor took the gauze off, his eyes were there again. That was one. The other one was one of our sisters, Sister Jesuina, who was dying with cancer. And she saw Mother in a dream, and Mother said to her, "Wake up, get up, go do your work." And so she got up and left. Those were 2 of the miracles.
Great. So we've got just a couple comments here from Lourdes. Very, very sad, that Italians were lynched, and that also occurred with those of Mexican heritage. And Diane writes, prejudice still existed in the 1950s. As an Italian girl, never chosen to play the Blessed Mother at Christmas pageant, only those with blue eyes and blonde hair. Ironic, as not all Italians are brunettes. So just a couple comments there. We do have a question from Anton. If you feel comfortable sharing your email, they would love to get in contact with you. And I can put that in the chat box here for everyone if you feel comfortable sharing.
Yes. P. Raculia at msshnyc.org.
Okay, I think I got it.
No, RACCUGLIA MSSHNYC.
Okay, there we go. Ignore the first one, everyone. Go with that second.
Going back to that idea of being prejudiced, recently I went to before COVID, I went to a restaurant, and it was an Italian restaurant. The owner was Italian, and we were speaking in Italian. He said, "So where are you from?" I said, "Well, my grandparents were from Palermo, Italy, from Sicily." He said, "Oh, no, you're not Italian." So I've gotten that a lot throughout the years, that Sicily isn't considered part of Italy. So there is prejudice still out there among our own.
Yeah. We've got an interesting question here. Are you seeing more initial interest of women entering orders as a result of COVID's impact on more quietness and introspection?
I don't know. I think post-COVID, we're all going to be living in a very different world. The Holy Father just wrote this Fratelli Tutti encyclical, which is beautiful. And I think more and more women will think of careers or vocations to help others. And I don't know if that will materialize into more vocations in the United States. for religious life. I don't know. It's interesting. We will see.
So I don't see any other questions here from attendees. I do want to kind of ask a summary question. What can we take away from Mother Cabrini's life that we can apply today? Just kind of overall, I know you've touched upon some of the immigration aspects of what we're seeing today and being open and reminding everyone, how they were able to come here and make a difference. But if you could, I don't know, provide some closing thoughts on that.
I think Mother would say to all of us, be courageous women, be audacious women, have a passion for mission and other people. Be dedicated to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and ask him to help you with your family, with your life, with whatever you're going to do in life. But be courageous, audacious and passionate women of faith.
That's wonderful. So we just have another comment here. Thank you for this inspiring presentation. Similar thanks from other attendees as well. I do just want to do a quick reminder before we close in a prayer. I know Sister has a lovely prayer for us to close with, but I do just want to let everyone know, for those of you that are maybe already on our listserv, or if you're not yet, you should be seeing a notice coming out shortly on May 1st. We are going to be celebrating NOIAW's 40th anniversary, so I do hope that you'll be able to attend that. But to close us off, I do want to turn it back to Sister if you want to close us in a prayer.
First of all, know that each and every one of you, what we'll say in our prayers and community at night is we're going to pray for all those who have asked us to pray for them. And that means every single one of you, for your families, especially during this time of the pandemic, especially during these struggles economically and spiritually and emotionally and health-wise, that all may be protected. And so I want to pray to St. Francis Xavier Cabrini. Woman of God, woman of spirit and vision, you crossed the oceans and borders many times to bring Christ's love to the world. You offered the people you met the gift of life, love, and hope by responding to their needs. Intercede for us now, we pray. Help us in our own struggles and give us the strength to work for others with love and compassion. May our hearts be a place of welcome to the stranger, the immigrant, and those most vulnerable. I ask all this through the most sacred heart of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister, and thank you all for attending our presentation this evening. Have a lovely
Thank you. God bless everyone. Take care.